Lakes today. We are talking about school lunches. We've got a topic that we're bringing in Josh Durso for. Josh, good morning.
Good morning, Rebecca.
So what is going on?
So this is a really interesting story. A school district in California is joining a bunch across the country that are switching the school lunch model, kind of flipping it on its head. A lot of people, when they think about lunch, they think about basically preheated, pre-prepped kind of food, stuff that's delivered, easy to produce, that sort of thing. This model is changing it from, the chicken nugget style, turkey a la king kind of thing that we were accustomed to growing up, to locally sourced, farm to table food, which as the story that we were featuring with this particular segment, some really good stuff. So sandwiches that go above and beyond the kind of sandwiches that you're accustomed to, and more like what you would find, for example, here in the Finger Lakes, if you went to a restaurant on Seneca or Cayuga Lake, or Canandaigua Lake. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this was because I think back to when I was in school, and school lunches were depressing for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I think because we've got a nice spread here generationally of different people, I want to get a feel for, first off, we'll start with the good. We'll start with something positive. What was our favorite school lunch item when we were in school? Nate, what was your absolute favorite thing?
I like them all. I disagree totally. School lunches were not depressing for me in high school. I like them all except for breakfast or lunch. That's the only one I didn't like.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I loved school lunch. My favorite part of the day.
Okay.
In high school.
Right. Jim, opposite end of the spectrum here.
Yeah, I hated school lunch, but there were some people that loved it, and
were there particular meals that you really liked?
No, I didn't really like much of anything. I think, I would get like the hot ham and cheese sometimes. It was on like a bun with a thick piece of ham. But even like the cheese that was on there, it was just like not really, it was like a school lunch cheese,
Right.
Process.
Yeah, it's just, and then I would get excited because I actually remember when I was really young, probably first grade or whatever, and I heard that pizza was going to be for lunch. And I was like, oh man, that's going to be awesome. I love pizza. And then I took like one bite of the pizza. I'm like, this is not the pizza like I know. Like I just didn't like the sauce, the cheese. Even at a very young age, I got turned off by it. And and then tacos. They came out around, we're gonna have tacos for lunch. I'm like, okay. And then again, it was just like, oh, all right, it's okay. I guess you can put the salsa on there. But I didn't really like any of the school lunches. And it wasn't also, I noticed with the people that liked the lunches and didn't like it, it was not a economic thing or a class thing. Whether there were some kids with less money or kids with more money at home. That didn't seem to be the differential.
Yeah.
There was a lot of kids that came from real nice families with a lot of money that ate well at home that loved all the school lunches. Like people loved turkey a la king, and I was like, oh my god,
That's the MVP.
Yeah,
so
the turkey a la king was my favorite.
That was your
yeah.
favorite.
So for me, I went to St. Pat's K through 8, preschool through 8, and
that's a Catholic school.
Yes,
was a Catholic school for
was a
non-Seneca
Catholic school.
Falls
Former
folks.
R.I.P. But I don't remember what grade this changed for me, but we didn't have hot lunches for a significant amount of time. So, we eventually switched to hot lunches.
Cold lunches? What did they do? Throw a brown paper bag at you?
It was like literally sandwiches, stuff like that. Like there was no hot lunches in the beginning.
Wow.
But yeah, once I went to Minders, I really enjoyed the breakfast sandwiches. Like I remember I would try to go early and get the breakfast sandwiches, but turkey a la king was king. It was my favorite. I actually made it this year after Thanksgiving because I hosted and had a lot of leftover turkey.
No,
and it was as good as I remembered.
Good idea.
But your homemade turkey a la king was probably a lot better. Like the schools, it was just like yellow, and after if it sat on the plate too long, there was a film on top.
Oh,
yeah,
I loved it.
It was too.
Does anyone remember the Minders people, the lady that was always like, you like the cheese?
Yes, of course. Yes. Rebecca, did you have a standout, or were they all kind of equally meh?
So I went to school on Long Island, and on Long Island, we have really good bagels. So they would source the bagels from actual bagel stores. And so the bagels at my school were phenomenal. They were like New York water bagels. They were amazing.
So you have sandwiches with bagels as the bread, or just bagels with
Just
cream cheese?
bagels with
and
cream
bread?
cheese, but the bagels were so good. I mean, I used to get one of those every day. And of course, I was running track at the time, so I could eat like a bagel every day, and it wasn't really a big deal. But I would only eat, I would never eat meat. I was always weird about meat in general. So I wouldn't eat meat from the school. I would only eat like the pizza or a bagel.
It sounds to me like that is kind of a bit of this model, this locally sourced, because I'm assuming that was not being shipped in on a Cisco truck.
No, it wasn't.
Now, obviously, cost is the big prohibitor here, right? Like cost is the big thing that every school district is wrestling with when it comes to putting on a quote unquote better quality lunch for students. But the idea with the program is that you start to change things up a little bit. You start to get the private market into it. I remember visiting a high school when I was 17-ish years old out in Ohio, and they actually every Friday would have a local restaurant come in and basically set up shop, and the school there would fund it so that the students would get their lunch, or could get their lunch if they wanted to. It was an option. It's basically kind of like an over and above beyond what they were just serving by default for lunch.
Yeah.
But it was a part of your school lunch package, or do you have to pay extra for it?
No, it was covered by the school. It was just kind of like a throwaway thing. I think in that case, the restaurants that were doing it were kind of using it as like a marketing springboard for themselves.
Yeah.
Getting into schools. But it was interesting because, when I think about school lunches myself, turkey a la king, it was great, except there was like no turkey in it.
Yeah.
It was just like potatoes.
I don't know what it was about, like those
with
processed
gravy.
Potatoes and gravy. It was just an exciting day.
For me, the volume was always, and like I think I graduated towards the end of the junk food line era. So when there was like an actual like junk food line.
Yeah, that was my lunch every day.
Right.
Like hot fries, maybe Slim Jims.
And it was a lot of times more like you could get more caloric load going through the junk food line, albeit bad calories, than you would get eating the regular school lunch. I remember, other than pizza day, there really wasn't a day when I like after lunch was like, oh, I'm full. Yeah. And I was a 130-pound string bean. Like there was no, like I couldn't even imagine how the athletes felt after they left lunch, like where they were. So, that to me is, if you're going to change anything about lunch in the future, is that like locally sourced is great, but we also probably need to, shake things up a little bit and make it more filling for students. Sustainable too, probably.
I wonder what a school lunch costs on average now.
Like I
That's
said,
a good
285 in
question.
the article.
What is it?
285.
285.
I think
what
that was
they
in
said.
Can't beat
California, though,
that.
so it's probably similar.
And I remember, I think it was like around $1.50
210 when I was in school.
when I was in. So there you
Two and a
go.
quarter.
I think it 5 to 10 cent increase per year is probably pretty standard. So you can do the math
Right.
from whenever you graduated and probably come to around where your district is now. Lots of pushes to make school lunches universally free in New York State.
yes.
You never know. It could happen.
Well,
this
it should
legislative
happen,
session.
honestly. I mean, you just look at the size of our national debt right now, and you think of like, when I think of like government and society, like we can do whatever we want, really, or whatever we're able to do, but we waste so many resources focusing on things that don't really matter or affect daily life. But in a perfect world, all school lunches should be free.
It's the most essential thing. Kids are there. They have to be there.
And I never, as a kid, realized until I got older, geez, how many other kids really relied on that meal as their best meal of the day.
For sure.
100%.
And so that's why, a lot of times administrators don't want to cancel school for consecutive days because of, weather or whatever, because they know that there's going to be a small percentage, in some districts, a large percentage of kids that are not going to get their nutrition over that period of time.
And they provide breakfast in the morning too, so two
Yeah.
important meals
Two
a
of
day.
three meals a day. It's
Very
not
important.
insignificant.
And there's some backpack programs too where they'll they'll provide you
some
with
home.
additional meals if needed.
Which those, especially locally
Pretty cool.
here, the one Doris Wolf started in Waterloo, it's a great example. But the backpack programs are amazing,
So
so important.
another question is, if we could add one thing, if you could pick a meal to add into the school lunch rotation, one food item, what would it be to shake it up?
Chopped salad, a delicious chopped salad with a ton of veggies, like a homemade dressing, something that's delicious that kids would actually like. Or like a Caesar salad with little bits of pasta in there, like the Gatehouse does with its Ellison Caesar. I mean, you're getting like a full meal. You have a bread.
I don't know why I was
gotta
going to
stop
say a
myself here
Caesar
because
salad.
That checks off all the boxes.
Having
Yeah.
the option of like something healthier, I think is really important.
I think the second option needs to, like, I remember when I was in school, like the second option was always like peanut butter and jelly,
Right.
which for me,
We had like three or
for
four
me,
options. when
yeah,
was in
I think
school.
I think
There's a whole
schools
wrap
have
line
like
style
slowly like
wrap/salad
added
line.
added things, but I think when you look at some of the poor districts across the country that struggle, the options don't really roll as deep. I think of things like this sounds silly, but like a grilled cheese should be easy to pull off for any school district any day of the week, right? Like that should just be a daily option. And it's more filling, obviously, because it has the carbs from bread and stuff like that. That would be, if I'm going to add something, I wouldn't even say like add something complicated like a salad. That seems kind of complicated. But like just little things like a grilled cheese.
I was thinking too, my
know.
second one, I was thinking a Caesar salad and then like a turkey club. I feel like that's easy to make. It's bacon and turkey.
If I was a chef of a school, I think every day I would always have a one pot type of meal, like goulash or pasta visual. Easy to make. It can make it good, right? And,
Chili.
and
Chili,
just
chili.
you're able to just and then if you have leftovers, you save it and go through it the next day.
Yeah.
I feel like the food pyramid back in the day, back when I was in school, was really misleading,
Yeah, it
like to
was.
then what it is today. Like I was just looking up like food pyramids, and it used to be that you were supposed to have the biggest amount of bread, rice, pastas, and grains. But I feel like that just turns to sugar in your body, right? So, but then they have at the top, use fats, oils, and sweet sparingly. So like the food pyramid as it existed when I was in school, I feel like is that still, I mean, I'm trying to figure out if they've changed it. It looks like they have, where you need more vegetables than anything else. And then grains, fruits, and proteins are sort of aside to the vegetables.
Yeah, I mean the whole idea behind that was, and this is kind of this is a fitness thing more than it is anything else. Carbs last the longest. That's it. It's the longest form of energy that you can possibly have.
More than protein?
Loading up on bread. That's why like runners, if you're running a really long race, 10K, 15K, you will load up on carbs.
We got a
Carb up the
yeah.
night before with a big pasta.
Michael
And-
Scott.
Yeah.
But the dairy used to be a big part of the food pyramid too, and I don't think that's thought of as an essential part of a balanced diet
Was
anymore.
the milk that you got with your school lunch not the most insulting part of the entire
Do you
proposition?
mean like the little cartons?
It was the smallest. It was like 2 swallows of milk.
I
It's
could
like,
never drink
what are we
milk
doing?
out
I
of
don't
those
drink
cartons
milk. I
either.
don't drink milk.
Really?
I
Oh,
like
God,
milk,
I
but
can't
not
do
out of
milk.
those
Not a
little
milk person.
Wait a
cartons.
second. You just couldn't drink it out of the carton at all?
I just don't drink milk.
I didn't like the way it tasted
I don't like
out
milk.
of those little cartons. I don't know why. I mean, I remember I'm really picky. I mean, I'll eat anything, but there's certain things that, and those milk out of those little cartons, I didn't like it.
Okay, I'm the complete opposite. I literally think like there's nothing better
I love
than
it, too.
milk.
Ugh.
Milk out of the carton is elite. I just wish
best.
the
What
are
carton
you, a
was
calf?
like
Are you
3
a baby
times as
cow?
large.
Because milk is meant for calves. Like technically it's not like meant for humans. It's meant for a cow's baby, a calf. I cannot do milk.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm with Felicia on
I'm
this.
not talking about drinking whole milk. I'm not that kind of savage. I'm
It's
talking
still
about
milk.
Even
like,
skim
drinking,
is
like-
just.
Ugh. It
I
has, like,
remember
a
when we were
funky-
younger, like Brittany and Sydney we would sit down for dinner and they would always have like with their meal a glass of milk, and I thought it was the most
It's gross.
disgusting.
I did that a lot growing up too.
Yeah.
That was a
I used to drink milk with dinners at home.
Oh,
Big glass of milk.
mm-mm.
No.
It's good for the
Not
bones.
it.
Yeah, that's building strong bones.
Yeah,
I mean, depending on how I think there's arguments against that it's not really as good for your bones because your body doesn't really process it in the way that like it's heavy in calcium, but the calcium that we are able as human beings to absorb and put toward good use for our bones, there's an argument that milk is actually not that good for your bones. So I don't know. I'm sticking with Felicia.
I would say I'm not sure what other kinds of like liquids other than water you would put with a school lunch, because you can't do juice. In my opinion, juice should be banned from everywhere because it's just as
bad for you.
It's
really
just as bad as
It's so
soda.
good.
Like you might as well be drinking like a full sugar soda.
Yeah, I think
with
milk
your
is the
lunch.
best option.
Water.
In terms of giving kids something to drink, whether it be water, but water was also available for us. So, I mean, milk came with your lunch, and it's filling.
I wonder if there are any
good
school
for you.
districts that do like seltzer waters.
That's an interesting point.
That's a really good idea.
Because
I think kids can eat and process anything. Like when I was a kid,
That's
I
fair.
could eat anything, and just still be good to go. It was only till about my early 30s that it started to like not be able to just put anything I want in my mouth with
Yeah.
no repercussions. And but back to the locally sourcing. There's a lot of pressure you have to deliver if you're a cafeteria. You have to deliver food to feed all these kids, and so if you're relying on locally sourcing, it seems like it would be more tenuous. Like a certain day, this delivery didn't come for whatever reason, and what's your backup plan? And but I don't see why it necessarily has to be more expensive than the other way. Maybe the expense would come on the prep side.
Yeah, which I think is one of the points that the article made. And even Nate, you and I were talking about that before the show today. It's, you're treating a school kitchen, which is a lot like a conveyor belt processing things, and you're turning that into basically a commercial kitchen in the sense of like being a restaurant.
Yeah.
And having to do all of the things that go along with that. So hours and hours of prep before serving prep starts, and then
another issue,
menu creation. There's
once
a lot
if you
goes
even
into
did
that.
all that, kids have certain allergies,
Right.
certain requirements, certain things that they will or will not eat. So when they're doing the way they do school lunches now with the kind of like a process mass produce, it's all like set to accommodate that.
Mhm.
So if you're locally sourcing things, you got to be a little more careful with that. And if you're making dishes on the fly, it would just add another layer of complexity to it. But maybe if it could be like a combination, a hybrid of the classic, processed lunches with one or two different options every day for something different that was made fresh.
I think what you'll end up seeing is like what some school districts are doing out in California and other states is start to integrate it.
Right.
And over time, slowly let that become the norm as the
makes sense.
process gets better and you become more efficient at like figuring out, maybe during certain times. I think about the Northeast, schools in the Northeast, Southern California, obviously a lot different climate than New York. There would be certain times of year when sourcing things locally would be a challenge and probably cost more. So you'd have to there'd be some trial and error, I think, over a span of years to get that,
Absolutely.
to get it right.
A good model of might be colleges. So like I've taken my daughter to look at certain colleges, and even when I was in school, I really liked the cafeteria food as opposed to, high school cafeteria. The cafeteria in the dorm was great.
Oh yeah,
So
St. John Fisher had the best food.
Colleges
That's why I
do
gained so much. The
colleges do
freshman
a pretty
15.
good job.
right now
And have for a while.
they're commanding more than $2.85 a meal though.
Well, yeah.
It's a lot
Yeah.
more expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is probably why. But we went to University of Rhode Island to take my daughter to visit, and man, I was like really jealous of I was like, Jackie, you should go here because this would be incredible. And then again, one of my favorite things about my college cafeteria, and they had it at Rhode Island too, was the cereal bar.
Yep.
Just like this wall of like 30 different cereals.
Oh.
And if you wanted to, you could mix and match them. You could go up as many times as you wanted. I really love the cereal bar my freshman year at school.
Well, it's kind of
lived
like
off it.
a lot of colleges seem, at least historically, have done I call it the Wegmans model, I guess, which is what
Stations,
I think.
right?
Stations. You
Yeah.
got stations all over the place.
That's what the place in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island University,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
And maybe that is the most efficient way to, I also think that it wouldn't hurt for school districts, or I guess the state, if the state ultimately regulates that, to, jump in and see where local restaurants would be willing to partner with districts on
You just
different
mentioned
things.
state regulation. That usually doesn't end well.
Yeah.
Here in New York.
Yeah, of course.
But you think about the quantity every day of food that's coming out of a school cafeteria for even smaller schools. It's a lot. It's a lot to reproduce and churn out every single day. And I think if you did use local restaurants, it would become more expensive.
Thousands of meals a day is literally the answer, because we're talking about, even the smallest districts in the region serve breakfast and lunch, and, they've got between, say, 400 and 800 students, K through 12. You've got to feed all of them 1 to 2 times a day. You're in the 1,000 range. The medium to large size districts across the Finger Lakes, you've got between, say, 1,400 and 42 to 4,600 students. Multiply that out by 2.5, and that's how many meals you're serving a day. It's a logistical challenge, and over a span of multiple buildings. You're not even just talking about one kitchen in one place. You're talking about 3, 4 kitchens.
Yeah, here in Seneca Falls, you got Frank Knight School, Elizabeth Cady Stanton School, the Seneca Falls Middle School, and the high school. Those are 4 different cafeterias that are operating every single day.
Yeah, so it's
and then you got to wonder about, on the other side of it, how much food waste, how much waste, recyclables. That there's a whole process to it all that we probably couldn't fully understand unless we worked in one of those cafeterias.
Well, and I think that's also one of the opportunities with doing the system a little differently. I think waste could be cut down in the long term.
There was a good amount of waste, though, when I was in school, with kids that would take food and not eat it.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where
I don't think you're ever going to be able to
really
prevent
stop with
that part of it.
They would always I would always venture to kids that they could give me some of their food. They didn't.
Love it.
But yeah, there's no, just to put a cherry on top of this, there is no plan like this right now in New York State. This is just something that we wanted to talk about because it's popping up in other parts of the country.
Sounds good. And Jim.